And now for the worst books. Hey guys, it's me. So today I'm going to be counting down my list of the worst books of 2014, and I have the exact same number of worst books as best books, so I'll be doing 14 again. So yeah, while I did read plenty of great books this year, I also read a lot of not so great ones. So yeah, I think this list might get kind of a little bit of criticism because a couple really popular and well loved books here on BookTube are like on this list, and I'm kind of scared to reveal them. But let's just get on to the list then. I also own less than half of these books, so number 14 is Unravel Me by Tahara Mafi. Don't kill me. This is the second book in the Share Me series by Tahara Mafi, which I already said. Anyway, the reason why this is on here, I rated this 3 stars when I read it, but as I kept thinking more and more about it, I liked it less and less. The reason why this is on here is it's not as bad as the other ones. It almost didn't make the cut, but this book I thought was kind of a little lacking in the action. And I mean, the first book didn't have that much action either, but it was still interesting. But this book was not really interesting, in my opinion. It was just lacking action and just wasn't interesting. And also, the 3 main characters in this book annoyed me to no end because just reasons that are kind of spoilery. So, um, yeah, the characters annoyed me with their actions a lot during this book. So, this is number 14. Number 13 is Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott. The reason why this is on here is because, okay, I rated this book 2 stars. This book, I felt like it had no point really. Like, okay, so the flap on the dust jacket, whatever thingy, it said like, oh, her story is one you will never forget and it will change your life. And it wasn't. Like, it just disappointed me. It wasn't really that inspiring. It was just sort of plain and normal. And it was kind of like a little disturbing, like not graphically disturbing, but just like weird at some parts. And yeah, I felt like that ending too made the whole rest of the book pointless. Like the ending was just, first of all, I don't even really understand what happened in the end. But from what I get from it, I think it pretty much made the whole beginning and middle and rest of the book pointless, pretty much. Number 12 is Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. I know these two authors are very hyped about, kind of, on here, but anyway. Okay, so I am aware that this book has 2 gay main characters. That's not why this book is on this list. Don't get me wrong. I am perfectly fine with that. I actually think that's a good thing that they're incorporating that into books nowadays more. But the reason why this is on here is that I think that that aspect was kind of shoved in your face like way too much. Like, I think, like, I don't have a problem with it, but when it gets to the point where that's all the book is about and that's the main basis, it gets a little annoying. Like, it just shoves it in your face, literally shoves it in your face, and I didn't really like that. And I also didn't feel like it had a solid conflict or a solid enough plot. And I also didn't really like any of the characters besides like 2, which one of them was like a side character. So, yeah, also I rated this 3 stars. It wasn't bad. Oh yeah, another thing. I think that the ending didn't really make sense to me. I don't know. Can somebody explain this for me? I didn't really understand. But yeah. Number 11 is Once We Were by Kat Sang, the second book of the Hybrid Chronicles. I read the first book also before this, and it was okay. I picked up the sequel to see if it was better, and unfortunately it wasn't. It was about the same quality, but maybe a little bit worse. It was like boring, but not. Like, I don't know. I rated it 2 stars. It was mostly boring, and I also think that things turned out very, like, it was just like really dumb how things turned out. Like, they were too perfect. Like, the way things should have been shouldn't have ended considering the circumstances. Like, it ended perfectly fine. And it was just very unrealistic. I didn't really think. I don't know, but I just didn't really like this book. Number 10 is The Kill Order by James Dashner. This is the prequel to the Maze Runner series. When I first heard about this like a long time ago, I was like, "Oh, cool, prequel. Maybe we might get some answers for this trilogy." And then I found out it follows different people. But I was still like, it might be interesting. So I read it, and this was boring. It's so boring. Like, even the parts where it started to pick up, I just didn't care anymore. I started to flip through the pages near like the middle to the end. I just didn't really care. The characters had no depth. They were basically, I don't know, they were like so blank, no emotions. I did not care for one person. No, that's not true. I cared for one person, but not that much. And also, I had a theory about this book, about the one part that never got solved, and then the ending is a cliffhanger. It's just so many things were wrong with this. It's just, why was this? This was not needed. Number 9 is The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I had to read this for English class for school. I rated it 3 stars. My main problem with this book was that it was mostly boring. I don't know. It was a classic, I think. It's an older book, so I don't know. I don't know if it's classic or not, but anyway, it's an older book. I think it was just boring. I think it was a little bit too descriptive, in my opinion. Like, there would be a whole page going on about how, oh, they walked on the dusty road and they had to cover their footprints and they were walking along and the day was so hot, and it just goes on, and it was boring like that. And there was like this really surprising part that I didn't see coming near the end, but somebody in my school spoiled it for me for literally no reason. So the whole surprise element was gone because somebody spoiled it for me. I didn't even say, like, no one was even on the topic of talking about that book, and he was all like, oh, blah 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 blah. I'm like, seriously? Like, if I hadn't been spoiled, I probably would have liked this book at least a little bit more and maybe rated it like a 3.75 maybe. But I was spoiled, so this makes me not like the book that much more. Number 8 is The 7 Habits for Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey. I also had to read this for English class for the summer, and I didn't like it. It's basically a guidebook for like teens, like, oh, how to live your life and stuff. But I didn't really like, okay, I thought the habits part, like, it was like okay, like good, generally good tips. But then the author added these like little stories in there, like in the chapters, that were honestly boring and I didn't really care, and it made the book a little bit like meh, and then I started kind of skimming through it a little bit. And also, some of the things the author said in the book I didn't really agree with fully. So, yeah. Number 7 is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Don't kill me. Okay, so the reason why this is on here is I think it's a pretty well known thing that for the Raven Boys, you either love it or you hate it. And I hated it, honestly. I thought it was boring and also a little weird for my taste. Like, I know it's paranormal, but it was just a little weird. I think a couple things about the book, I'm not going to say what they are because they're spoilers, but I think that a couple of the things were just very weird. Like, for example, the one part was like this guy like threatened to cut off the one character's like face. And then there was some sort of like ritual. I don't know. And also, I thought some parts were a little hard to understand. Like, I still don't completely understand what happened in the end. I don't know. And again, it was just very boring for me from beginning to end. So I didn't really like it that much. Number 6 is Unholy by Neal Shusterman. This is the second book of the Unwind dystology. This is a recurring problem with some of the books on this list. I found this book to be incredibly boring, much unlike the first book, which I rated like 4.5, 4.9 something stars. I really enjoyed it. But this was just really boring, like from beginning to end. Maybe the end was a little bit better, but it was still really boring. Just really boring. No. And it's such a change from the first book, which I really enjoyed. And another thing, the character Lev in this series, didn't like him from book 1. Still don't like him in this. Still don't really like him in the third book, which I read. It's not on this list. But Lev is annoying. Alright, we're down to the top 5 worst books. Okay, so number 5 on my list is The Testing by Joelle Charbonneau. Okay, so this book was basically a huge ripoff. Like, almost everything was copied from other books. Like, the first half, I was actually starting to like it. It was actually really interesting. But the second half onward, that's where it started its downfall. It copied, okay, let me just tell you. It copied the Hunger Games, especially in the second half. It copied Divergent a little bit. It copied The Maze Runner at one point. It even copied Legend at one point. Like, it just took a whole bunch of really good dystopian books, put it together, and made it worse. And also, the characters had no emotion whatsoever. And the main character, Sia, I think she was a little bit too resourceful. Like, whenever a problem comes up, she's all like, oh, this is the solution. And then they find a solution, and then they just go about their thing. And then another problem pops up, and they just solve it almost immediately. And there were several times when Sia should have died, but she didn't. And it's just very unrealistic and just... No, it was not good. Number 4 is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Again, another book that I had to read for English class for school. This book was very boring. I am going to tell you right now, much like many of the books on this list, and also very confusing. Like, the dialogue was like old-timey and not easily understandable at some points. I actually had to go on SparkNotes to actually understand what happened at some parts of the book, because I literally either was too distracted because it was boring, or because I didn't understand, like, the dialogue. It's just, it was a very confusing and very boring book for me. And the ending, I think, was too short. It should have gone on, like, at least another chapter or two. It ended way too quickly. Number 3 is Allegiant by Veronica Roth, the final book in the Divergent trilogy, and it pains me that this is on here because I loved Divergent. Insurgent, not so much, but I still really enjoyed it. This, however, no, I can't. I'm still not okay. Like, not to mention that awful ending that everyone knows. But this book was so boring. The first few chapters, I was so excited. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is going to be so good. It started out well enough, but it just... It was boring. Literally nothing happened besides the beginning and then, like, the very end. That thing that happens that, that thing that happens. And there's just many problems and many things I did not like about it. And when I first finished this, I rated it, I think, 3 stars. But I reduced it to 2 stars because the more I thought about it, the more and more I disliked this book. And the more I became disappointed with it. This should be rewritten, honestly. Just the whole book was flop. Number 2 is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. Don't kill me. I know a lot of people love this book, but I didn't. I found it incredibly boring from beginning to end, besides, like, one part that lasted, like, 2 pages. And I also didn't really like the romance. The romance was, like, very insta-love, and then it was, like, weird development. Like, I don't know. Like, it was just very weird. And also, I did not connect with any of the characters whatsoever, besides one of them, which was a side character. And again, it wasn't even like, oh, I love this character. I'm just like, oh, I sort of kind of like this character. And then everybody else was just meh. Like, not very good. I honestly don't see why everyone likes this book. And also, it just ended. Like, just ended. Like, no big conclusion. It just ended. And I did not like that at all. I don't know. I just hated this. And the worst book of 2014 is Don't Kill Me. The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me. Let me explain. So I know everyone loves this. Let me explain why I didn't. Let me explain why this is the worst book I read this year. Because while it started out well enough, it got boring. Very boring to me. The whole book was just incredibly boring for me. I don't know. It was just very boring. And also, it was very confusing to me at times because the point of view switches, but you don't get any indication as to when the point of view switches. It just switches. It's like some parts. First, the first part we get a point of view from Cassie, and then it switches, and I'm still thinking I'm reading from Cassie's point of view, but then it's like another person's point of view, and it's confusing, and then it's like halfway through the chapter you find out whose point of view it is. It just changes like so many times. Like every time there's like a black line in here, the point of view changes. But you don't know whose point of view it is until you like read a couple pages.